Before the sails of European ships dotted the horizon, before the echoes of foreign tongues filled the air, Cuba was already a vibrant tapestry of life, woven with the threads of people and stories stretching back millennia. It was a land teeming with its own unique history, untouched by the outside world. The first inhabitants, the Guanahatabey, intrepid explorers in their own right, arrived by canoe around 4000 BC, braving the open waters to reach this island paradise. They established a life as coastal hunter-gatherers, living in harmony with the rhythms of the land and sea, taking only what they needed and respecting the delicate balance of nature. Their existence was a testament to their resourcefulness and adaptability. Later, the Taino people, skilled navigators and farmers, arrived from South America, bringing with them new skills and traditions. They introduced agriculture, transforming the landscape and providing a more stable food source for the growing population. They built organized villages, centers of community life where people gathered to share, trade, and celebrate. They fostered a vibrant spiritual life, with rituals and ceremonies that honored their ancestors and the natural world. Their beliefs were deeply intertwined with their daily existence. They cultivated crops like maize, cassava, and beans, using sophisticated farming techniques passed down through generations. They built bohios, traditional dwellings made from natural materials, providing shelter and a sense of home. And they played ceremonial games, like the ball game Beatty, which were not only a form of recreation but also a way to connect with their gods and ancestors. They were skilled artisans, weaving their beliefs, their history, and their very souls into every aspect of daily life, from pottery to basketry to woodcarving. The Taino population flourished, numbering in the hundreds of thousands by the time Columbus's ships appeared on the horizon, a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. Their society was remarkably peaceful, communal in its structure, and deeply connected to the rhythms and bounty of nature, a stark contrast to the world that was about to arrive. But everything was about to change. When Spanish ships finally appeared on the horizon in 1492, it marked a pivotal moment in Cuban history. The Europeans encountered not an empty paradise ripe for the taking, but a thriving, complex culture, a sophisticated civilization with its own unique customs, beliefs, and social structures. The Taino lived in a world where the concept of private property was foreign, where sharing and cooperation were valued above all else, and where gold held no inherent value as a measure of wealth. They had no experience with the kind of violence or the devastating diseases that the newcomers would unknowingly unleash upon their island, forever altering their way of life. Their world, carefully built and nurtured over thousands of years, a testament to their resilience and adaptability, was now poised to face irreversible change, a change that would test their very survival. The arrival of these outsiders, these ships from a distant land, would mark the definitive end of one era, the era of the Taino, and the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter in the long and complex history of Cuba. Columbus's landing in 1492 marked the start of Spanish conquest and devastation for the Taino. The Spanish imposed the encomienda system, forced labor in mines and fields, thinly veiled slavery. Violence, overwork, and European diseases decimated the indigenous population within a generation. Leaders like Hatuey resisted but were brutally executed. With the Taino nearly wiped out, the Spanish turned to sugar and tobacco, fueling their colony with enslaved African labor. The transatlantic slave trade brought hundreds of thousands to Cuba, reshaping its culture and economy. Slavery became the engine of Cuban wealth, built on suffering and a rigid racial hierarchy. The island's identity was forever altered by this collision of worlds. Beneath colonial order, the desire for freedom simmered. Slave revolts and conspiracies planted the seeds of revolution. In 1868, Carlos Manuel de Céspedes launched the 10 Years' War for Independence, joined by a multiracial army. Though the war ended in stalemate, the dream of a free Cuba endured, championed by José Martí. Martí united exiles and revolutionaries, calling for a republic with all and for the good of all. The final war for independence began in 1895, led by Martí, Máximo Gómez, and Antonio Maceo. Spanish brutality escalated, but the rebels' resolve only grew. As the conflict reached a fever pitch, a powerful neighbor began to take notice. As Cuban rebels neared victory, the U.S. intervened, using the USS Maine explosion as a pretext for war. The Spanish-American War was swift. Spain surrendered Cuba to the U.S., not the Cubans. The Treaty of Paris excluded Cuban voices, and the U.S. occupied the island until 1902. Independence came with strings attached. The Platt Amendment let the U.S. intervene in Cuban affairs and claim Guantanamo Bay. American corporations dominated the economy, enriching a small elite while most Cubans remained poor. Political instability and U.S. interference plagued the new republic. Marty's vision of a just, inclusive nation seemed distant. Resentment over lost sovereignty simmered, setting the stage for future upheaval. Cuba's struggle for true independence was far from over. The early Cuban Republic, born from the ashes of Spanish colonial rule, was unfortunately marred by widespread corruption. Graft and bribery became commonplace, undermining the very foundations of the nascent nation. This corruption was further exacerbated by significant U.S. influence, both economic and political. American businesses held considerable sway over the Cuban economy, often at the expense of local interests. In this climate of instability, Fulgencio Batista, a former army sergeant, seized power in a 1952 coup, ousting the democratically elected government. Batista's regime quickly devolved into a brutal dictatorship, ruling with repression and silencing any form of dissent through force and intimidation. His policies largely favored the wealthy elite, enriching them further while neglecting the needs of the majority of the population. While Havana thrived as a playground for tourists, with its casinos and luxurious hotels offering a facade of prosperity, the reality for most Cubans was starkly different. They faced widespread poverty, limited opportunities, and the constant threat of brutality at the hands of the state. It was in this environment of inequality and oppression that Fidel Castro's audacious, albeit failed, Moncada barracks attack in 1953 took place. Despite its military failure, the attack and Castro's subsequent trial, where he delivered his famous "History will absolve me" speech, transformed him into a symbol of resistance against Batista's tyranny. After being imprisoned and later exiled to Mexico, Castro, along with his brother Raúl and the Argentinian revolutionary Che Guevara, began plotting their return to Cuba. They eventually returned in 1956, aboard the Grama yacht, and launched a guerrilla war from the rugged terrain of the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Their revolutionary movement steadily gained support among the rural poor, who had long been neglected and exploited by the Batista regime. As the war progressed, Batista's regime grew weaker, more isolated, and increasingly desperate. By 1958, with popular support for Batista dwindling and the rebel forces gaining momentum, the revolution seemed unstoppable. On January 1, 1959, realizing his defeat was imminent, Batista fled Cuba, seeking refuge in exile. Castro's rebels triumphantly entered Havana, greeted by jubilant crowds who celebrated the end of the dictatorship. The old order, with its corruption and oppression, had finally fallen. However, despite the euphoria of victory, Cuba's future remained uncertain, fraught with challenges and difficult choices. A new era, full of both promise and peril, was about to begin for the island nation. Castro's revolution began with promises of reform, not communism. Early policies redistributed land and nationalized industries, angering the U.S. and pushing Cuba toward the Soviet Union. As relations with the U.S. soured, Cuba embraced socialism, aligning with the USSR for economic and military support. The government launched literacy and healthcare campaigns, but also suppressed dissent and banned opposition. By 1961, Castro declared the revolution socialist. Soon after, he openly embraced Marxism-Leninism. Private enterprise vanished, and a one-party state emerged. Many Cubans fled, creating a powerful exile community in the U.S. Cuba became a Cold War flashpoint, trading one dependency for another. The island's society was transformed, equal in some ways but tightly controlled. The revolution's promise came at a steep cost. Cuba's alliance with the Soviet Union thrust it into Cold War drama. The 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion failed, strengthening Castro's rule and deepening ties with Moscow. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The U.S. and USSR struck a deal over Cuba's head, leaving Castro sidelined but determined to assert independence. Cuba became a leader in the non-aligned movement and sent troops abroad, most notably to Angola. These interventions gave Cuba global influence but strained its economy. Soviet subsidies kept the island afloat, funding social programs and international ambitions. National pride soared, but so did the costs. Cuba's fate was tied to the superpower rivalry. The Cold War shaped every aspect of Cuban life. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 plunged Cuba into crisis. The special period brought severe shortages and blackouts, and hunger. Cubans adapted with urban gardens and small private businesses as the government cautiously opened the economy. Tourism became vital, creating new inequalities between those with access to dollars and those without. Social tensions rose as the egalitarian dream faded. Despite hardship, Cubans showed resilience and ingenuity. The government legalized some private enterprise and foreign investment to survive. The special period left lasting scars, but also forced change. Cuba's identity was tested, and its future became more uncertain. The island was adrift, searching for a new path. After Fidel Castro, the iconic leader who shaped Cuba for decades, stepped down from power due to failing health, a new era began. His departure marked a significant turning point in Cuban history, leaving many to wonder what the future held for the island nation. Raúl Castro, Fidel's brother, assumed the presidency and cautiously introduced economic reforms, recognizing the need for change and adaptation in a rapidly evolving world. These reforms aim to address some of the long-standing economic challenges facing the country. The reforms included expanding private enterprise, allowing Cubans to start their own small businesses, and decentralizing some state control, giving more autonomy to local entities. This shift aimed to stimulate economic growth and provide new opportunities for Cuban citizens. A brief thaw in relations with the U.S. in 2014, under the Obama administration, brought a wave of hope and optimism to the island. This historic moment signaled a potential end to decades of hostility and isolation. However, this period of optimism was short-lived, as renewed sanctions and persistent economic crises soon followed, casting a shadow over the island's prospects. The tightening of restrictions created new challenges for the Cuban economy and its people. The collapse of Venezuela, a key ally and trading partner, further exacerbated Cuba's economic woes, as the island lost a vital source of support and resources. The COVID-19 pandemic, with its devastating global impact, dealt another severe blow to Cuba's already fragile economy, disrupting tourism and straining the healthcare system. Rampant inflation further deepened the hardship and struggles faced by ordinary Cubans, making it increasingly difficult to afford basic necessities and maintain a decent standard of living. The introduction of mobile internet, while initially limited, gradually gave people a voice and a platform to express their opinions and concerns, fostering a sense of connection and empowerment. This newfound connectivity played a significant role in fueling the largest protests in decades in July 2021, as Cubans took to the streets to demand change and express their discontent. The government responded with a crackdown, suppressing the protests and arresting many demonstrators, highlighting the tensions between the state and its citizens. While the government managed to quell the immediate unrest, the protests served as a stark reminder of the deep frustration and discontent simmering beneath the surface of Cuban society. Despite facing immense adversity, Cuba's vibrant culture, with its rich traditions of music, dance, and art, continues to thrive and serve as a source of national identity and pride. Education remains a cornerstone of Cuban society, with a strong emphasis on literacy and access to schooling for all citizens, regardless of their background. Healthcare, despite its challenges, remains a significant achievement of the Cuban Revolution, providing universal access to medical care and boasting a strong tradition of medical internationalism. The island nation stands at a critical crossroads, facing a complex set of challenges and opportunities as it navigates its path forward. Cuba is caught between its revolutionary legacy, which continues to shape its identity, and the urgent demands for change and reform from a population eager for a better future. A new generation of Cubans is increasingly taking center stage, eager to shape the future of their country and bring fresh perspectives to the challenges it faces. However, the future remains uncertain, with many questions lingering about the direction Cuba will take and the challenges it will overcome. The Cuban story is ultimately one of survival against all odds, a testament to the resilience and determination of its people in the face of adversity. It's a story of resilience, of enduring hardship and bouncing back from setbacks, demonstrating an unwavering spirit in the face of challenges. And it's a story of hope, of a people who continue to believe in a brighter future, even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Its next chapter is still being written, day by day, by a people who refused to give up on their dreams and aspirations for a better Cuba.